So what I decided to research is regarding the issue of carbon emissions from vehicles on the road today and the effects of them and reasons why it might be perhaps even beneficial to switch to electric vehicles based on, and then comparing the information on the production of different types of vehicles and the carbon footprint they produce and things like that. But I'm going to start off researching by discovering what the current situation is with carbon emissions from vehicles on the road today, how many are on the road, what the estimated carbon emissions are, and see if I can get some information about what people are saying, see what the general consensus is, and then see if that general consensus lines up with what is actually going on. So I'm going to start out by just typing a simple question. What is the effect of carbon emissions from and I'm going to start looking through here, and there's EPA.gov. That's a pretty reputable source. Usually it's a government website. The EPA is the one in charge of pollution and things like that, so you know it's a fairly reputable source. It still has to be vetted, but as far as the specific information, but it's a fairly reputable source, so that's a good resource. It talks about how much a typical passenger emits per year. That's transportation in general, cars and trucks. That's probably beneficial, but that's including the trucking sector and things, but that's not going to affect what I'm discussing about cars and whether it's basically what I'm looking at is it more efficient to build and produce electric vehicles with the batteries and all the extra emissions from building that type of vehicle versus the emissions produced by regular gasoline engines, especially with getting how efficient they are today. So I'm looking more towards the cars and consumers and things like that. This is an Australian website, so that's not going to affect what I'm looking at in the US. It might be beneficial, but they have different policies. Wired.com is a technology website. They deal a lot with new tech, so including electric cars. So they have a lot of tech information on there. So that would give you an idea of what the general consensus and things are on what's important right now. Scientific American, I believe that's a peer-reviewed journal, so that would be a reputable source too. And also, it's a fairly old source, so it might not be as relevant. But if an older source is coming up on a Google search, I've usually found that it's not something that someone decided to publish something on Twitter or something and hope it's what they're looking for. And it's easier to vet if it's older and more thorough posts. So I'm going to check out this one here. I'm going to start with seeing what an average vehicle is on EPA's website. A typical passenger vehicle emits 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. Can vary based on vehicle's fuel economy and the number of miles driven per year. That's obviously true. I drive way more than most of my friends do in a year, and I also have a more efficient car than most of my friends. So it's kind of balance out and kind of change how it all is, but the average is that's a good number to have. Let's see here. How much is burning 1 gallon of fuel? That's helpful too. You can see how many gallons were sold in the year. I'm pretty sure you can look that up. How many gallons of fuel were sold last year? Gross volume of gasoline sales in the U.S. by state. That's a 2013 article. From January to December 2013. Billions of gallons. So this might be helpful. If I can find information like this, I'll keep this in mind. If if I can keep, let me see here. I'll keep this in mind because if I can find an updated version of this for more recent years, then I could multiply how much emission is per gallon of gas on average by however many gallons are sold per state, and I can find out exactly what the emissions would be, estimated emissions would be. Of course, it's all an estimate because not everybody's using all of that gas. It might still be sitting in their car or doing something else, who knows. But that might give you a better option because that's not only cars, that would include things like lawnmowers and diesel generators and all sorts of other things. And of course, there's different numbers based on whether it's gasoline or diesel. Diesel is going to have usually more emissions, I think, per gallon. The difference is, even though diesel emits more per gallon, it usually is more efficient per gallon. So you're going to go further per gallon. And so I'm not sure whether this would average out to, like per mile, I'm not sure what it would average out to, whether diesel would be more efficient or less harmful or more harmful to the environment based on the CO2 emissions. This might tell me that. 404 grams of CO2 per mile. That's probably based on gasoline. That's helpful. Basically what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to figure out what the general consensus is and why people think what they think, why policies, lawmakers, and everything are shifting towards more towards EVs and things like that, and trying to realize or try to research whether or how valid most of those arguments are. So I know it is true that there's a lot of emissions going out there that are harmful to the environment, and the question is, are some of the policies that are being put into place, are they actually effective, or are they kind of not very helpful? Like with the tax credits given to electric vehicles and things like that. So now I have some general ideas of topics or things I can base the information off of. This is an EPA website. They're the ones who control all of the emissions and things in the United States. So I'm going to take this information as accurate. I'm not sure exactly calculation details and more information. This looks like a report from March 2018. But I'm going to take these numbers, I think, as a general number based on an estimate. I believe these to be accurate enough based on the website it's coming from. I don't see any specific links to what report it was done out of. This is more of a Q&A type thing instead of an actual article. So it might be a little bit harder to cite this. I wonder if there's an article I can go to from this. I'm not sure. That is one thing about EPA's website and websites like this. It's more like you get your information that you need, but it's not usually articles like you would see in a news website that's easier to source, or even a peer-reviewed journal. It's not like an article or research presented in that form. It's just kind of, here's the facts and do with what you will. So this one would be a little bit harder to cite. I'm going to go back and also look at just a general question and see if there's any articles, general consensus, and things on that of whether does producing electric I don't know how to spell vehicle. Whatever. Produce more emissions. Create more emissions than gasoline. And there's tons of variables with this. Things like In Europe, they tax vehicles based on their weight, and for that reason, diesel cars are taxed higher because the diesel engines are heavier. So that's something to think about. When a vehicle's heavier, it's taxed more because it does more damage to the roads. The heavier the vehicle, the more damage it does to the roads, which is also going to tie into things like not only costs of redoing roads, but the emissions. The equipment that is needed for repaving a road is just astronomical, the amount of emissions they put out, because they're just giant diesel engines that are not designed to be efficient. They're just designed to get the job done and be very powerful. So that's a factor too. If you really want to go down that rabbit hole, there's a lot of factors deciding whether it's more efficient with gasoline or diesel or electric. I mean, electric cars are heavier than gasoline as well. Just in general, because the battery packs are so heavy. So there's all sorts of different things that I would start looking at. It's a long process, but if you want to get thorough information, I found just find a lot of different rabbit holes and kind of see where they all tie together. Mythbusters. This is not going to be probably anything very reputable, but it might have links to things that are more reputable. I'm not sure. I'm already seeing here this picture here. I think it's from Road and Track magazine, so that's not. I recognize the picture. So that's. I don't think they even cited it here. Wow, that's interesting. So that's already ringing bells. I mean, that might not be as reliable, just based on the type of website. It's at cleantechnica.com. They're an EV website, and they, well, not clean tech, is what it says. So I'm already seeing that it might be a little bit, I'd have to take this website with a grain of salt. So you can see that they're taking information from a Vehicle Technologies Office of the U.S. Department of Energy. So they might be getting information from here as well. I'm not sure if that's the same office or what. Upstream emissions, wheel-to-wheel emissions, greenhouse gases from electricity production. Use electricity production data by sources in state. Alternative fuels data centers estimated annual carbon dioxide equivalent emissions of a typical EV. So the annual carbon dioxide equivalent emissions of typical EV. So I'm pretty sure that's talking about where the electricity is coming from. So whether it's coming from a nuclear power plant or a coal power plant like you have in West Virginia and places like that, where is that electricity created and how much emissions are being produced just from creating the electricity? Is it even worth it? That's another huge factor. National average is 4,815 pounds of CO2 equivalent emissions for a typical EV per year, as compared to the average gasoline power car, which produces 11,435 pounds of CO2 equivalent emissions annually. See, I'm wondering where they get this information. Is this the same information as right here? No, EPA's website. EPA's website says 10,000 or 8,800 grams from a gasoline car per year. Oh no, that's per gallon. Huh. Let me see. Average annual carbon dioxide. Average, so this is based on a car that gets 22 miles per gallon, drives around 11,500 miles per year. 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. Does that line up with this? I'm honestly not certain of the metric ton conversion, so I'm going to check if this is equal to this number here, the 11,453 tons to pounds. So 4.6 metric ton, which is what I got from the EPA's website, is 10,141 pounds of CO2 emissions. So that is not the same as right here. So that leads me to question, where did they get their information here from? Because I don't see it in the letter. I'll have to check further down and see where they sort of cite